they deny it, you could still put a renewal on later to just continue on with the levy path.
So they're not voting twice?
No.
They're voting once?
It's one movement of the taxpayer. Yep, one act. We don't do a lot of those, but we're seeing more of them with these old levies because you want to preserve the old levy integrity of the 12.5% coming from the state because that's not going to be reproduced.
Right.
But people need more money because, as you know, inflation is your enemy, and right now it's eating pretty hard. Rich, you had a question?
Actually, that was my question, if it was gonna be treated as two separate, on a ballot, two separate boxes or just one.
Now, there's nothing stopping you from putting two levies. You can do a renewal and you can do a new levy at the same time. I mean, people can do anything they want.
Right.
That's a hard sell because people are going to vote twice. And oftentimes the taxpayer's logic is, I'll approve this one, but I'm going to deny that one. It's kind of a,
Right.
you know,
And we
you
have
got
to
to blow
argue,
that ball.
and we have to argue that every year too, why there's two of them on there, which could be a tough thing as well.
When they come back for renewal,
Right.
yes.
You know, this is what we keep doing.
Timing is important, as Adam indicated. I also think you have a healthy reserve right now. I mean, that's a good thing. You know, right now, you're probably not desperate for additional money, but you do need to look down the road. You don't want to wait till you're broke and then say, oh, geez, we're broke.
Right.
You've got a lot on your plate right now. I just don't know that you need to factor that into your equation. I mean, it's, how much do you want to take on at one time? I do not envy your position, especially for your pay rate.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd give you a raise if I could, trust me.
So, Dr. Rue, do you have any other questions?
I do have one.
Okay.
So, county employees cannot participate in the process of getting a levy, and having not participated in a levy before, I'm just curious about how people actually raise the funds to get a levy passed.
Yeah, well, you're right. It's actually, public officials cannot engage in the levy process. They cannot engage in the encouragement of the passage of a levy or use any tactics like threats of layoff if you don't pass this levy. All you can state is the financial facts. That's what the law says. It is a high audit issue right now. I'm just advising. That law has actually been on the books for quite a while. It has not been heavily audited. The state auditor has made it his mission in life to go after entities that break that rule. So, for example, you don't want to put a levy sign on government property because that's construed as the government is endorsing that levy. Your job is to determine the need for money. It's the public's job to determine whether they want to give you that money. Typically, the way that is done then is a committee is formed with disassociated parties. You get people who understand the dynamics of what you're up against. They will fight for you and help you, and they will campaign under the campaign levy to get that momentum through.
So that means that board members, even though we're not employees of the county, board members also cannot participate in the passage of the levy.
Yeah, I'm not aware, and I did stay at a Holiday Inn once, and I can't give you legal advice. My understanding is it's any public official. Public official is irrelevant of whether you get income.
And keep in mind, 'cause I think I reminded someone else via email, you actually are employees of the county. You may not get paid, you may volunteer your time, but you are, once you're appointed, you are an employee of the county.
Enjoy that. Enjoy that.
Because you are an appointed official.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, that's typically something that we're going to see. The county's going to move. The county and townships are really the ones that have run afoul to that requirement a lot. Safety forces, you see firemen all the time out there with boots on, and please support us. You really can't do that. It needs to be spun off to an individual who's disassociated but interested, and they should be the one campaigning for that. Because in effect, you shouldn't be using the government to promote the funding source. Sorry. I'm not going to get at you. It's going to be the state auditor, and they're going to pull your information. And we've already been alerted as auditors. 88 of us have been already told this is an audit item. It's coming. So get ready. So we're just telling people, please don't get yourself afoul with this. I don't know what the ramifications are. Do they negate the levy? I don't know. And I don't want to be the first to find out.
And there's usually a hot topic item like every year, every 2 years. Like a couple years it was the STAR program for records requests. They tell you in advance, like, this is the new thing for this year. And then it usually just keeps going forward. But like records requests, 2 or 3 years or whatever it was, that was a big thing. It was a star rating, and that was huge. So this is the new thing.
Yeah, lucky us.
Yeah.
Any other questions, or is there any information I can get for you, or?
Is there anything printed that summarizes all that information?
Well, I do have some, now that Adam mentioned, I actually did some research for a township just a couple of days ago on this campaign for levy issue. It was some bulletins. I could send those over to Adam. He can
That'd be
get them to
great.
the board. That will help. I also have some things that kind of define what levy terms, everybody uses different terms, right? Qualified, what does that mean?
Yeah, I would like to.
Qualified means it's qualified for rollback. And rollback is the rolling back of the money from the state in place of the 12.5% from the taxpayer. So those are, everybody speaks the geek talk, right? And that's auditor speak. And so I have some documents I can send over that may help you. Trust me, everyone is confused by levies. Levies are the most misunderstood thing until it's time. Millage is the other thing that's very misunderstood. What's a mill? Why do we do that? There is a map.
Who sets the millage?
Well, the millage is set annually based on property value. So indirectly, I help set it by evaluating property, but the state actually tells us the calculation formula. And they're looking at the entire state, and they're determining what a mill value is for your section of the populace. So every year, I get a new mill amount. The millage from Geauga went up again. Every year, it goes up since I've been here.
And what is it now? You said two?
Total millage? In 2020.
Just ours is 0.2, but he has
Well, your mills, you're at 0.2 mill collection, but for example, in 2022, it was 601,013,000. That's the total value of all real estate in the confines of Geauga County. So just about $3.6 billion. So as values go up in the valuation process, which I'm doing a reval this year, as values go up, that millage will go up accordingly. If the property values drop, that's when the millage value drops. But then people add a house, so you have to offset just real estate, land versus a house on land. It's worth more, so that alters this equation.
And we did, I believe, I do have a list I can provide all of you, Mr. Walter gave me, and there, I think we're the lowest, well, we're tied for the lowest levy with, if there was somebody else, it was a 0.2, I think.
In the county?
Yeah, the county.
You're tied, yep.
I'm trying to think who, I can't remember who it was, but we're the lowest. with somebody
Department
else.
on Aging?
Actually, you are the lowest.
Oh, because theirs went up, didn't it?
Yeah, the next one up is mental health, it's 0.5.
0.5, yeah, because they went up.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
do.
so we're at 0.2, the next lowest is 0.5. So we would more than double ours to be even the lowest levy, tied for the lowest levy that way.
Is the mental health one tied to population then?
All of these are all county levies. It's all tied to the territory. It's defined by territory, not population. Population divides how many people pay
That's
for
a
it.
good question, but it's all.
Yeah, so our
When you
population.
tell me the mental health one went up, I'm trying to figure out what it was based on.
It-
Property value?
It's based on the mill's value, which is the value of all real estate.
You mean why they increased it?
It was on the ballot.
It was just based on what they need for their services.
That was just a renewal. That wasn't a replacement. That was a renewal.
So if we decide to renew, or if we decide to renew and add, and we pass a resolution at the board to do so, to put it on a ballot or whatever process it is, it then goes to you for certification?
Well, yeah, you have one additional step than most people, because you have to go through the commissioners, I believe,
Yeah,
right? So
yes.
you have to first request that you wish to place a levy on, the commissioners approve that. But, so that's an added issue for you as a board that townships don't have, because townships are their own unique legislative authority. But the process is pretty simple. You first pass a resolution called a certificate of need. You basically say, we have need. And you can request as many of those from my office as you want. You can say, we have a need for 2 mills. We have a need for $3.6 million. We have a need for $3 million. Give us all of our options. And what I give you back is a certificate that defines how much each taxpayer will pay per $100,000 of house value. So that tells you the metrics that a taxpayer is going to realize. So typically it's, so many dollars per 100,000 of value. You do straight math. If it's 3 mills, it's times 3. If it's a fractional mill, it's times that fraction. And then I give you that certificate. You have to then accept that certificate, pick the one you want to use, because I could give you multiples based on your request. And then you take that past resolution along with all of the previous paperwork to the Board of Elections, and you file it for the ballot. And there's new language this year on House Bill 140, I believe, where it used to be by cents, which was crazy because no one does that math. Now it's $5,000 of value. So the certificate looks different now than it did a year ago. That just happened since November. So we can walk you through, and Tammy and Kristen, they do these all day long. Your window is you must have it at the Board of Elections 90 days before the election on that day. And there's no grace, it's 4 o'clock that day.
Which is coming up real fast.
It's February, like 2nd or 1st.
It's got to be 1st or 2nd to get.
You're on it. If you're doing it this first election period, you got to get on it like right now.
No.
February.
I think by law, I'm required to, it just changed, so I could be wrong on this exact number. I think it's 7 days. I have to give you that certificate within 7 days of you giving me your request for it. And we try to do it within a day because the timing is important here, right? If I drag my feet too long, I could put you out of your window to be able to have a meeting to approve and accept all those, which is not right. So we try to do what we have, but if we get flooded with them, we have to take them in the order we have them. Okay? Anybody else?
So we have,
How does our levy compare to other counties? Do you know that answer, Adam?
So it varies wildly just because there are some places that have a special levy like for emergency preparedness, and they have their general levy, and they have a levy for environmental health or for a, they call it, don't they have the health district, they have like districts, like a financing district or a mosquitoing district they can have all those additional ones. The only thing that I've yet to see, except I think one county, is having a tax assessment and a levy. There are multiple levies, but usually you get one or the other, where if you have a tax assessment, they get rid of your levy, or they keep the levy, you have a tax assessment.
Yeah.
Somebody always wants to save money. It just depends on which side it is.
There's no apples to apples though.
Not really. It also depends like size, county. I mean, we have we only have 93,000 people here, which you can't compare. 95, sorry. You can't compare that at all to Cuyahoga or Summit or Stark. I mean, you could break it down, but what services they provide, and that's a lot of it. So it would come down to like what services you guys want to provide. Do you want to expand the service? Do you want to attract a service? Do you want to discount services? The fee is lower. It would come down to a lot of that to direct services.
So the only last thing is, a lot of people are confused with the function of the Budget Commission with levies. They thought the Budget Commission had to approve a levy. We have no authority in approving or not approving a levy being placed on the ballot. The Budget Commission's role kicks in once a levy is passed. So our test at that point is, you're entitled to the money generated by the levy. Have you demonstrated a need for that money? That's why we caution people, if you have a huge carryover and you're asking for an additional levy, when it comes to budget time, we're going to evaluate that. We're going to say, your burn rate is X. You're bringing in this much more than X. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? Entities in government should not become banks. The public is the bank. And you should burn at a reasonable rate to what you're bringing in. You're in an anomaly position right now, and I appreciate that, and I think the other members of the Budget Commission appreciate, when you're in a state of, let's call it flux, for lack of a better word, the unknown is the problem, right? I mean, how do you predict in a budget what you need if you don't know what your chemical makeup is of your organization? How do you represent that in numbers? And so I've recommended to Adam, you need to articulate that. You need to say, we're in an unknown place right now. We need time. We need time to get our ducks in a row. The Budget Commission is understanding of that. It's people that come into the budget hearings and say, hey, here's my budget. And you go, well, what about this $6 million you have in the bank? And you go, well, we could build a building. It's not when you decide. You don't decide in this meeting. You should have already figured that out coming in. And then our job is to put that back in the taxpayer's pocket. That's our job. So the last 2 years, we have put in millions of dollars in the taxpayers' pockets, like $7 million. I'm not telling you this to cause you any concern, because I believe you have a very valid argument, provided you make that argument. And you're only talking to one member of the Budget Commission. But those are the tests that we do, and we take it very seriously. Our job is to protect the taxpayer. And so you don't want to pull the trigger on an additional levy too soon. You want to do it when you can justify the need, saying, here's our burn rate. We don't want to wait till this point. We need to do it now for these reasons. That's our test. It's kind of a weird test. It's somewhat opinionated.
And I apologize, I think I used it interchangeably with Budget Commission last time we spoke, because so I'm looking at more of what Mr. Walter said, if we get it, and they say you don't need it, or that the need is not there, that's what I'm looking at, where I think I interchangeably just say, we do have to be careful what the Budget Commission thinks if we go with traditional levy. And I guess I was meaning more of afterwards, kind of having somebody else.
We cannot stop you from putting a levy on. We can only stop you from collecting against that levy. And we only do it 1 year at a time.
And the only way we can't put a levy on is if we don't meet this February deadline.
Yeah, or you do something wrong in that process. Yeah, that's, usually we find is people kind of plow forward and then they didn't do it right on the document. And Board of Elections has heartburn with how it's worded and it's run, you run out of time. The clock is your enemy. That's what I'm telling you. But I mean,
The current levy, though, we are collecting until the end of 2023, right?
the levy goes through 2023, we pay out through 2024.
2020.
So you're at the beginning of your of your 2-year budget.
Okay.
You're ahead of the game.
Okay,
I would be
so we're-
concerned if we were next year,
Right.
and you're coming on to the November election, you got one shot, and you
Yeah.
better make your best pitch. You've got a window of time here, and missing it the first election cycle isn't the end of the world because it's an expensive cycle. There's not a lot on the ballot for this year early on.
For May?
November is going to be a little different. You're going to have some fiscal officers and I think one trustee from each township. So those are going to spread out the costs for you.
And like Mr. Walter mentioned, my concern when we talked last time is if we wait until 2024, all of our eggs are kind of in one basket at that point. Because if you don't do it in May, you only have November and that's it. And if you miss it, you're in some trouble at that point.
Mental health used that same logic. They actually were in kind of turmoil similar to you for different reasons. They put theirs on a year early and theirs passed. So I think that was a wise decision to make because there was likelihood that people may respond negatively to what they were reading in the paper. And yours is very different than theirs, but nonetheless, it's the public that determines who passes and doesn't pass. So I think that was a wise move to make. I would encourage you, if you're going to renew this levy, that you take advantage of the 2-year bite because you want to make sure you get the best opportunity to pass that levy, whatever you choose to do. So I'm not recommending or not recommending a levy, by the way, which I've been accused of before. So.
We could be audited, for
I was
that.
gonna say.
No, I'm not that. But some people have said to me, well, the auditor said we should put this levy.
Yeah.
That'll help you. And I said, no, that's not what I said. You have 2 bites at the apple. I mean, but people want to blame me for it because that's convenient. But, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for being early.
And I would like to thank you for sending us information about levy and campaigns, or I guess it wasn't you, it was probably your staff we should be thanking.
The one that
Thank
from the Secretary of State?
Yes.
Yeah, I had that sent this morning, I think, or early on, yeah. The Secretary of State's been very good. They're actually pushing for the same arguments as the Auditor of State because they see the common problem. I mean, obviously, the Secretary of State controls elections, and the auditor's going to be watching over our shoulders. So
Right.
I'll push out as much of that as I think is relevant for you and get it to you and do with it what you will. You're going to get different opinions from different people on it, though.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for your time.
I'm going to scoot if that's okay with everybody.
Yes,
You don't want to
sir.
stay and hang out?
I'm going to go home and watch.
That's why we put you at the head of the line, see?
Not.
We did have, I had a couple text messages, I apologize when everybody's talking. There was some drop of the video or audio, which I think we have fixed. So if you get questions, there was some up and down during, that's why I was getting up and down to talk to them. But
I wonder if
I think we're settled back out now and rough and running. So I'll hand it back off to all of you lovely folks.
Okay. So I guess we can go back to operations planning. So who would like to give us an update? Carolyn, Lynn,
Yeah, okay.
Ashley,
I was like, Ryan was
anybody?
gonna do it.
Dr. Cameron.
All right, operations, so Carolyn and I met with Ron Graham, and we had our attorney Brian Castor in the meeting. We have agreed, as we noted at the last meeting, to meet weekly to try to understand what options we might have. We did discuss a bigger overall plan, pros and cons of having an agreement. Is that the right word to use? Cooperative agreement. We also indicated in the last meeting that we would reach out to other counties to talk about whether or not we have a cooperative agreement. So we did meet with Ron this week, and where we kind of landed was that the Lake had issued the letter saying contract expires on January 31st. We agreed, and as we shared last time, that that could go till June 30th this year. So Brian Castor is actually drafting an agreement that would extend us to June 30th, give us a bit more time in evaluating what we end up doing here. So that's one thing. And Ron, in discussions, is starting to work some numbers for us that are purely numbers for us to be able to talk about. You know, what it would cost if they were to pick up services for us, okay? So at this point, Ron is doing that, Brian is doing that. We will meet again next week with them to see where the status of that work is. Carolyn, you got anything you want to add?
Not about any of that. I think Ron's gonna be looking at some different models when he runs those numbers, because I think this is kind of a big math problem about what we do from here. So having those numbers is really key to any sort of next decision that we make.
Different models, like,
I think, let's keep that vague, just because that was a discussion with council, so I don't wanna open that can of worms.
And until we see some models,
it doesn't matter.
it might not matter.
Right.
Right. And so Carolyn has sent out emails to the other counties, Portage, Ashtabula, Trumbull, and Summit County. Sort of before I left that whole folder at home. Those 4 counties asking if they would like to meet with us to talk about cooperative agreements. We probably will share similar discussions, see what they suggest. At this point, one county has returned and said, we'll talk with you. So we are looking to plan that discussion for next week. So Carolyn and I are pushing on that front to figure out what models may be that we can bring back to this group. So that's all I have to.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. I know it's
For the big paycheck.
it's a lot more than we all figured when we signed on to the board, but hey. Any other questions for these two? So I guess the next thing that we want to get an update about the director, health director, the positions for administrator and environmental health director. How's that going? I know we've gotten a few applicants, and we have a couple of the board members working on that. So.
Yeah, so where we currently stand with administrator is we have a total of 24 applicants. We did discuss at the last meeting that we would take the Bamboo HR posting off hold because it was still live on the other job boards as well. So what Lynn and I have done at this point is we've reviewed our candidates. We did just have those 2 come in today that we are going to put our heads together and look at. But at this time, we have 4 that we are extending Zoom interviews to. 3 of the 4 have responded with times, so we are just waiting on 1 candidate to respond by the deadline, which is tonight. And then once we have that final response, we will send out Zoom links for initial interviews, so screening interviews per se. That will be an hour long. That will be occurring on January 9th and 11th, pending the 4th candidate doesn't have a scheduling conflict for either of those dates. Once we get, those interviews underway, we will be objectively scoring them using our score sheet that we've created, and we will bring information back to the group for further steps in action.
So we're doing the preliminary screens. And we do have, as Ashley said, the scoring sheet, but we also have already have established the list of interview questions. Granted, some of those questions might, depending on the candidates, have to be, a little bit massaged, so we understand. But I would like to just make sure this group agrees. I see that when Ashley and I do this, we need to share with the candidates the situation that we are currently looking at, that we may end up, having to come up with an agreement with another county because we have, potentially lack of funding. There's an assortment of things that are, making it more difficult to function, perhaps. in a
Just
nice
wanting
way.
to be transparent with the
So,
current
we feel we
environment.
need to, so is there anybody that doesn't think I should share information? No, I mean, they can Google.
Yeah, it's
So-
public,
Yeah.
but I think it's also just the right thing to do, because if anybody's coming into, a
They need to understand
less than
where
stable
we are.
work environment. But that being said, Lynn and I, once we do speak with these candidates, we do want, this to be group discussion and make sure everybody is on board with, our recommendations and what we come up with, so.
Yeah, so we'll figure out the next step, group-wise, we'll figure out the next step. And after that, we will have to have another step after that, after we do final interviews.
Okay, all right, very good. Again, thank you to you two for all of your work on this, and are there any other questions from anybody?
Not about that topic.
Is it something
What?
related to what's on the
I just
agenda?
wanted to circle back to the levy issue.
Oh. Okay,
We've been presented information, time is of the essence. What is our next step as a board? And when are we going to take that next step?
that's a good question. I'm glad you're on that team with me, Mark, to keep me in line. I think we probably, well, the fact that we're meeting weekly is probably a good thing. We probably should make a decision before the end of the month, at the
We
latest.
have to make a decision.
Yes,
Because
otherwise
We
we're
have to
gonna
make-
lose that window in May.
we have to have it submitted by the first week of February.
Yes,
So,
If we want to do the May.
and we have to send something to the auditor.
Correct. We have to, a request for need from the
And
auditor,
get the commissioners.
and then we have to go for the commissioners
get the
and just say,
blessing from
hey,
the commissioners.
Right.
Yep.
Essentially,
So I'm
we
just
probably need to make a
wondering
decision
with
if we
the
are or not by
few
next
meetings that we have left in the month of January,
mhm. Yeah.
is there anything that we have to do today?
You really can't do anything today because there's no new business for that.
I see.
We could put it on for the next meeting, which is the 11th, 11th. We could put it on for that, and you guys could make, if you wanted to, that. You could also wait till November for that election. It's up to the five of you, but you'd have to make a decision. The other reality is, and I was talking with Mr. Walder, none of you can do the campaigning like maybe it has been done in the past. As he alluded to, that was very common in the past. That doesn't happen anymore. You need to find someone outside of all of you and outside of all of us to do that.
And we don't know who else would be on the ballot. We're sharing that cost at least for the levies
For
until,
May, I don't know.
so it's kind of just,
Usually November, there's a plethora of things on
so
there.
we
As
anticipate.
I
big
understand,
costs.
there's two things. Is there anything, who would we be sharing the cost with on the levy in May? And two, who is going to spearhead the committee outside of all of us that's supportive of this? And who will be making, whatever, I mean, we need to talk about it if we have a committee. And
So I think this
And
needs to be
also-
put on our next meeting's
Yeah.
agenda,
I
so
can
we
do
can
that.
have that discussion
Because the
and
decisions we make on other
make decisions.
things affects this as well.
In the meantime, if people know people, we should think about who might be able to fill those roles outside of our group.
I'm not an attorney, but I did take the time to read some of that stuff. I think I sent it to you, Mark, right? But that is not my interpretation is we are allowed to talk about the levy as long as we stick to the facts, but we are not allowed to say, well, Adam, how about giving us some money towards that, towards the levy. That's my understanding. Now, I guess we could reread that and make sure, but like he was talking, even like when the trustees have a road levy they put on, the trustees do most of the talking and they just present the facts about
Right.
why the levy should be put on the ballot.
That's what he said, is you can
So-
present the facts, you cannot fundraise.
Right, but I think we're able to do that, but I am not sure. And I'm the treasurer of that levy committee. I'm also the treasurer for the Department on Aging Levy Committee, which I sit on the board for as well. So
well, can we talk about that? since it's not on today's agenda, can we talk
Sure,
about what,
yeah.
what does that
But-
mean? You're the vice chair of the levy. I mean, I'd kind of like to know all that. And I think if Mr. Walter can send us some,
More information.
send us the easy read on levies,
Mhm.
that would be very helpful.
I agree.
And then maybe what we could all do too is make sure that we all look at the 2023 budget and that we all come to a decision. You know, or should we just do a renewal and, you know, go with that, or do we, you know, what we need to do? And I know it's gonna be limited information, but,
I think Mr. Walter, I mean, one thing I caught, he says, we have a healthy cash reserve, and they take that into account when they do additional dollars.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I keyed in on that as well.
correct, I mean, I think that was a soft way of saying, you know, just be mindful of what your burn rate is
Right.
his words.
right.
And we don't have a giant burn rate of our reserves.
Yeah.
We have not, we use some, but we're not burning down 25% a year. So I'd be mindful of that too.
So,
Well, I think that's the kind of thing, are we able to ask Adam to gather data and create the talk points so we can?
For the
that-
levy?
Yeah, for that discussion at the next meeting.
Yeah, I actually asked Alta, I just did, so it wouldn't be lost in translation, I sort of put it on for the next meeting. I do have some paperwork from Mr. Walter he provided me, so I can go through and kind of see what the numbers were. I want to say if we go from this levy to a new levy, I want to say one for like 723,000 or something like that, if it was today's millage, not
Okay.
2019's millage.
So the question I have is essentially when he was discussing the two separate topics of reserve as well as the levy. So he recommended that we have a higher reserve based on what was presented. So in doing so, and getting that higher reserve, you know, how does that affect the discussion of levy? And if we have those higher reserves, then are we essentially
So one thing that I'm a big
setting ourselves up for?
So one thing that I'm a big fan of that's going to be on the agenda for the regular meeting in January, 'cause I think that's really where it should be at, is approving the reserve fund. And it's obviously planning for the future, so it fits in your operation planning. You should have dollars that are earmarked for specific purposes that nobody can spend. You don't want them overspent, you don't want them just neglected over years either. That's what that reserve fund is for. So one thing that he mentioned, which I've been keen on, is vehicles, as an example. Vehicles costs are skyrocketing. You know, if you're budgeting 10 to 15,000 a year, which is what they used to cost, in today's dollars, it's 40 to 45 probably, for a four-wheel drive Jeep or something else. Because let's be real, when we're going on job sites or in the snow, you want a four-wheel drive vehicle. And then you factor in that a lot of money we front load via fees or other things that we get back afterwards, but it may be a front loading because if the car's going up, we're still charging the old rate, and then we charge the new rate when the new fees come out. So, you know, planning for things like that, planning for new furniture, obviously have new furniture for the building, but you don't want to plan for new furniture even before you need it, it's a lot. New computers, because I know computers are outdated every 5 or 7 years at the most anymore. Software, such as the EH software that we recently purchased. There's that software that has a huge financial cost, but it should have a huge return as well in terms of allowing the public to do things digitally versus coming in here for every little thing, for environmental health at least. And then there's other things, building upgrades, things that we just don't normally spend things on, or large items that do occur over time. So I would keep those items in mind, and that's why I'm a big fan of the reserve funds. We do have a payroll reserve fund, which I started, which that one was approved. The reserve fund Mr. Walter was talking about was one that I did work with him to get the exact verbiage, because there was a disagreement a little bit on the verbiage and how it best would flow. So that, we raised that to $1 million. So we can put up to $1 million in that reserve fund. And it's earmarked just for cars, fixed assets, so desks and things like that, larger items. And I do think, financially speaking, that is a very wise decision, which is why I asked to create that from all of you, was I think that's what you should be doing. It's a savings account, in essence, for the health department. The payroll reserve one is those every I think it's 11 years, there's a 27th pay. You want to have that money set aside because your budget doesn't magically go up for the 27th pay. It's the same budget as every year, but you're paying one more paycheck out that year. There's also retirements, which sometimes happen in bulk if OPERS, our retirement systems, make a change. Sometimes you see a mass retirement, or you see people looking at retirement. You're probably going to want to have those as well, where you look at that and have money set aside, so you're not constantly draining down your coffers and going, man, how did we overspend by $20,000 this year? We didn't really overspend. It was just we got hit with an expense that we didn't plan for in advance, and we can't do it. We're allowed to, so that's why we'll have two reserve funds, which is payroll.
So how much is in the payroll?
What's that?
How much is in the payroll?
I think that one I set up, I want to say it was $200,000 or $300,000. And usually they're good for 10 years, so you'll sit there and draw it down over time, and that's the max that you can put in there. Because we're only 25 people. I don't foresee us in 5 years spending, $150,000. Over 10 years, maybe over that time too.
I just want to make sure when that is communicated, there's the difference between the reserve fund and the levy.
Correct.
Because when people hear, oh, you $1 million, that doesn't mean we have it.
Yeah. Well, and the hard part is, so for some of you probably experienced this, $1 million is very different to different people. If you go talk to LeBron James, he probably is like, it's $1 million. If you talk to any of us, it's like, it's $1 million. But if you own your own business, you go, that's not that much when you figure in, buildings and assets and people, retirement.
Capital expenses.
Right. That's not as much as it sounds like, in that factor. So those are just things I would think about, especially.
Well, I would like to have a logical discussion about each of these items
At our next meeting.
in our next meeting.
Yes, agreed.
It'll be on the special meeting, and then we'll have the actual reserve fund, which will be on the regular. Sorry, the next one's a special meeting. When I say regular, the next one's a special meeting. It'll be on there for you guys to discuss. Then with the next regular meeting, we'll have the reserve fund, which is the 25th, I want to say, 25th of the month, and we talk about that there.
Well, we've got 2 meetings in between now and the end of the month, so.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? So, I guess public comment. Ms. Lewis, do you have anything to say?
I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to limit it, I think, to one. And it has to do with the discussions about finances. And I agree with you, it's kind of difficult to try to relay to the public this message of, it seems like there's some sort of perilous financial situation that public health is in, and to hear that there's this big reserve. That's, in terms of messaging, it's difficult. But I've heard you all having this conversation, over the last month, and I've heard it combined with conversations about mandated services. And so there's some concern, I think, about whether some services that are currently being provided, such as vaccinations for the Amish, is there any danger of those services being cut in the near future? Or is that something that's far off and sort of dependent upon whether a levy is successful? And I wanted to throw out that I believe Kenston has a levy in May. I believe their board approved that. I encourage you to follow up on that, but that's what I'm
Thank you.
aware of.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, who wants to answer? Do you want to answer that?
Well, I'm
I
not
mean,
expecting
basically-
an answer, but I just wanted to get it on the record.
Sure.
I think that requires probably some.
Carol and I have been looking at vaccinations and other things for a long time in terms of what makes sense, what doesn't. And the Amish is our primary. I think what was it, 85 or 90% or 87%.
It's
of our vaccinations.
it's probably close to 95%. I started pulling some numbers. I was actually trying to gather some data to put together to actually give you guys that formal report. My nurse and I started working on it today. This is grant time, so it's just chaos right now. But we were looking at, because we were mentioning about the different, you can go to CVS and get a vaccine, you can go to Rite Aid and get a vaccine, Walmart. I started looking at those to see if that's viable, if that's something that, if the board moves in that direction, whatever, if that's off the table, that's something that Geauga Public Health or whatever becomes, what kind of expense will that be for the Amish? And because they are charged, you are charged an assessment fee when you walk in there. A lot of the clinics will not even, CVS, Minute Clinic, you can go to the pharmacies, a lot of them, and this is my preliminary, they start at age 12 immunization. If you go to like a Minute Clinic, which means you have to have that particular hub, you have to have a pharmacy within the county, and I'm pulling numbers on that, which ones have, which ones don't. If you look at that, they're paying the assessment fee, they're charged per vaccine. Just CVS alone, randomly, a vaccine, $105 to $118 each. They do not offer babies first vaccines. The Minute Clinic starts at 18 months. So those babies first series of shots is not even something that, let's say, CVS, the Minute Clinic offers. Now maybe Rite Aid does, and there's other pharmacies that do. That's what I was looking at to see what's their option. if that goes away.
I would also look from a pharmacy standpoint, see Board of Pharmacy guidance on vaccine administration and outpatient pharmacy settings will tell you the age limits on all of those, on what pharmacists can administer versus what the minute clinics versus what you have to get through other places. But to Carol's point, I think this is a good and loaded question, right? I think this is on all of our radars. I do think that, it's contingent upon a lot of things, but the last thing we as a board want to see is, a compromise or a sacrifice of any of these vital services that we provide, especially to the populations who utilize them and absolutely do benefit from them. I don't think we have an answer at this time for how exactly we're planning to approach that, but I would say that that's definitely on the forefront of our radar, as evidenced by Carol's continuous work
And
on
a
that.
rough timeframe, we're talking like the next 3 to 6 months, or we're looking at like over the next.
A time frame for,
But when you would be making decisions about whether to cut current services?
I think, like you said, we've been discussing this, over a period of, series of meetings, and I think basically us as a board, we are very conscious, and we want to make sure that we're transparent, but we also want to make sure that we are getting the most bang for our buck. So we look at all things that go on in this department at any time, and everything, especially in the condition we're in now, we're looking at everything to see what we can do to streamline or whatever, but yet we still want to provide the best services in this county for the residents.
Even if
too.
those
So-
services are not provided by us directly, any cooperative agreement, we have to take all that into consideration, and we're not there in those discussions yet.
and I don't think that, key or focal point of our discussions is what are we cutting? I don't think that that's something that, we are focused on saying, what are we getting rid of? It's how can we make things better?
And we don't think about just monthly. I mean, we look years down the road. Truthfully, I worry about what happens in 10 years. You know what I mean? When we're maybe all gone, or at least I'm gone. I don't know about these guys, but you want to make sure that we plan for the long term. And like Carol says, we offer a lot of services, but we charge, but we certainly don't charge for what the services cost us.
And I think
by any means.
the other thing that I've learned over time is the code that says may and shall. There's very few mays. No, there's very few shalls. Shalls. Okay, very few shalls, and therefore, if that list is small, we have to meet that. Anything else we do beyond that is a may. I don't know where that takes us.
But I think you've heard the passion from the board that we would like to keep the services intact as much as possible, and if anything, improve on them. That's why 2 meetings ago I was advocating for helping organizations get an EMR, electronic medical record, together so we could do the job more efficiently and still maintain high quality. So I'm passionate about wanting to preserve those services because they're obviously serving a definite need in the community that is very difficult to provide any other way, especially at the low cost that the population is expecting that they would be able to be provided for. So,
But many of the components of that as well, EMR capabilities, et cetera, also do depend on the decisions we make.
agreed.
Okay, Mr. Cameraman, you want to comment? I give you the opportunity, and you always.
I appreciate that.
One day
Okay,
he's gonna come.
not a problem. So we have executive session on here. Do we need to go into executive session? I don't.
It was a placeholder, just
Believe
if
so.
you, just you need.
Do you want to?
I would like to go for a short time.
Okay, so, I guess we can skip down. We have the list of the next 3 meetings, January 11th, 2023 in this building at 5 o'clock, January 18th, January 25th, which is our regular board meeting. They will all be in this building at 5 o'clock.
And no action will be taken after this executive session, correct?
Right.
I don't have-
So do we have a motion to go into executive session to discuss, are we going to discuss appointment and employment?
I had questions
Yes, that's your
about
only
it.
option.
You read the whole thing, you read the whole thing though, it's a special meeting, so.
To discuss appointment, employment, and compensation of employees. So do we have a motion?
So,
Do we have a second?
Second,
Okay, so roll call vote, Dr. Ruth.
yes,
Mrs. Brady.
Yes.
Mrs. Roman.
Yes.
Dr. Jones.
Yes.
And Mr. Param, yes. So we are in executive
Do
session.
you need
at
myself
5:54.
or Dr. Cameron?
Lynn?
I don't
I'm
think
sorry.
so.
Do you need myself or
Is
Dr.
anyone in
Cameron?
there with us?
I do think we need you,
Okay.
Dr. Cameron.
So we'd like to invite
You wanna go
Mr.
home?
Lynch. You want to come in?
Look at that, look at that, look at that face.
Oh.
The excitement.
Put on the spot. I don't think we, unless,
I'm coming.
all right.
Okay.
And I will not be here on the 18th, just so you're all aware, that's the one time I'm out. So, usually we don't have a meeting on the third Wednesday, so, right, just a reminder.
You do it.
This time we do, but I've got my thing I do every year that's that,
We'll allow
that
it.
day. That's the one thing I do.
Are we going to your office or?
Yeah, because there's a new lock on here I don't have access to. They put a door in front of the door. stuck it out, my man. Yeah, there we go.
I know, I told him he could have went. So,
What else do we have to do on Wednesday night?
yeah, really. Do we have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
All right, second.
Second.
It's hard.
Okay,
7:10, we are adjourning from executive session.
okay. So I guess we need roll call vote
Four.
in getting out of executive session.
No.
Okay, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're done. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you all.
Okay,